All right, welcome. It's another exciting edition of the program, The Desk on Global Television, where we look at issues from very deep perspectives, giving you very balanced analysis of issues from the global scene and to the African continent across the globe. And definitely, we'll be looking at Nigeria in deep eyes and giving you issues from different perspectives. We'll be looking at on the global scene, the issues making the rounds is no doubt the fact that United Nations Secretary General, in the person of Antonio Guterres, informed the Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday that his invasion of the neighboring Ukraine breached the United Nations Charter and international law, according to the readout of their meeting. The United Nations Secretary General met with Putin on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, following the speech in which Guterres called for a just peace in Ukraine, reiterating his position that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is said to have violated the United Nations Charter and international law, which the Russian president did not seem to like, but that's Antonio Guterres speaking truth to power, as Guterres also stressed his commitment to establishing freedom of navigation in the Black Sea, describing this as essential for both Ukraine and Russia, as well as the global society for the essence of food and energy and security. Remember that the Black Sea is a very critical trade route for Ukraine, one of the world's largest grain exporters, yet it has faced severe disruptions since the Russian invasion began in February 2022. A UK brokered deal previously enabled Ukraine to continue its agricultural exports via the Black Sea, but Moscow withdrew from the agreement in 2023. Despite this, Kiev has managed to create a maritime corridor allowing trade to continue. So Guterres and Putin, who last met in April 2022, also discussed the conflict in the Middle East, particularly the urgent need for a ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon. So we'll be looking at that very closely. We'll also be looking at a very interesting talking point where a Dutch court ruled on Wednesday that a billionaire and global vaccine proponent, Bill Gates, must stand trial in the Netherlands for allegedly misleading the public about the safety of COVID-19 vaccines during the pandemic time. According to reports, 7 plaintiffs claim to have suffered injuries from the vaccines and sued Bill Gates along with former Dutch Prime Minister and current NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, members of the Dutch government's COVID-19 outbreak management team, and Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla, and the Dutch state itself. So we'll be looking at what this would mean for the globe, and would this mean that other countries will join the suit if they did win? All right, we'll also be looking at other issues away from that. We'll take you to another very interesting talking point. We'll be bringing you back to Africa, where Mozambique is in the news this evening. Just to let you know that the Mozambique capital, Maputo, awoke to wreckage on Friday as protests overnight turned really violent following the ruling party's Frelimo's re-election after 49 years in power. Let's also let you know that hundreds of opposition supporters demonstrated rejecting what they called a ballot stolen by a corrupt electoral commission, which on Thursday announced candidate Daniel Chapo had won October 9 election with 71% of the vote. So we'll be looking at clearly what the leadership crisis in the African continent is. One of the big things we'll be looking at. All right, our guest on today's edition is no other person but Benjamin Alika, who is a lawyer and also a leadership advisor. Will be helping us look at all these very interesting talking points as we discuss issues making the rounds on our desk this evening. All right, first of all, let's confirm if he has joined us, then we can hit our discuss button. Good evening, Benjamin Alika. Thank you for joining us on the program, The Desk. Okay, my producer says he wants me to go for a quick break before we join my guest this evening. All right, let's go for a very quick break. When we return from the break, the program, The Desk, would continue as we hit our discuss button, and we're going to have Benjamin Alika, who is a lawyer and a leadership advisor, join us and help us look at this very interesting talking points all through. Stay with us. Is The Desk on Global Television.
Nigeria. Come join Anthony Momodu on television's most compelling and facts-finding talk live show.
We are the Palestinians, we are the Canaan, because
that this country gets it right.
Who are these bandits?
It's The Desk on Global Television, where we analyze and dissect storming issues and commentaries in the world's biggest black nation, Nigeria.
Who is being held accountable for this money?
The eyes have it.
We stay and decide policies and reforms on The Desk. Tune in Mondays to Fridays, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Global Television. Let's stay on The Desk.
Is The Desk on Global Television.
Nigeria. Come join Anthony Momodu on television's most compelling and facts-finding talk live show.
We are the Palestinians, we are the Canaan, because
that this country gets it right.
Who are these bandits?
It's The Desk on Global Television, where we analyze and dissect storming issues and commentaries in the world's biggest black nation, Nigeria.
Who is being held accountable for this money?
The eyes have it.
We stay and decide policies and reforms on The Desk. Tune in Mondays to Fridays, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Global Television. Let's stay on The Desk.
Is The Desk on Global Television.
Nigeria. Come join Anthony Momodu on television's most compelling and facts-finding talk live show.
We are the
Can we
Palestinians.
not
We
say
are the
that of them?
Canaan because
That this country gets it right.
It's The Dex on Global Television, where we analyze and dissect storming issues and commentaries in the world's biggest black nation, Nigeria.
Who is being held accountable for this money?
The eyes have it.
We stay and decide policies and reforms on The Dex. Tune in Mondays to Fridays, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Global Television. Let's stay on The Dex.
Welcome back from that break. It's still The Desk on Global Television, and we've got a Nigerian lawyer, someone who is a leadership consultant and a transformation entrepreneur in the person of Benjamin Alika, who is our guest on today's edition, joining us via Zoom to help us look at the very interesting talking points we've got on the desk this evening. Good evening, Benjamin Alika. Thank you for joining us on the desk.
Yeah, good evening, Tony. My pleasure. Thank you so much, and good evening, viewers.
All right, we've got a lot on our desk this evening, but we're going to start from the global scene, and we'll be looking at a very interesting occurrence at the sideline of the BRICS, where the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres informed the Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday that his invasion of neighboring Ukraine breached the United Nations Charter and international law. According to the readout of their meeting, the United Nations Secretary General had met with Putin on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, following a speech in the which Guterres called for a just peace in Ukraine, and reiterated his position that Russian invasion of Ukraine violated the United Nations Charter and international law. Let's look at this as a leadership consultant and as a lawyer. Do you feel satisfied at the fact that the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres was able to speak truth to power to someone who is feared and revered in the person of Vladimir Putin? Can you hear me? Alika, can you hear me?
My phone was
okay.
muted. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. Okay, good. Okay, beautiful. All right, good. All right, good evening, viewers, and thank you for having me, Tony. Well, to your question, it is giving, and it is quite, I would say, elementary. From the time of the formation of United Nations and followed by the United Nations Charter, the statutory basis by which the organization came to being, it was very clear that the United States as a global watchdog over nations to ensure that the sovereignty of nations are, protected, they are defended, against international aggression, one nation seeking to usurp or, that nation or invading its territorial integrity, adopting its government, and so on and so forth. But overall, the picture that the world was giving and the role United Nations was meant to play, part of ensuring that situations such as this between Russia and Ukraine does not have meant to play that world role as the policeman of the nations, as it were. Now, the challenge is whether the United Nations from the beginning had the capacity, or especially in the area of enforcement, all right, to prevent such occurrence. And when it does happen, if it could be able to intervene decisively in such a way that the invading nation, what's it called, nation or leadership, or whoever it is either brought to justice or it is, abated. So, but now that is not there, like we all know, and that is why the United Nations have been there watching, and then see Russia not.
All right, I think we're having some technical hitch due to the weather conditions, and we hope Benjamin Alika will be able to rejoin us as this conversation has just started, and wanting to get his perspective as regards the Russian President Vladimir Putin's meeting with the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres at Kazan during the BRICS summit. And we'll go for a quick break. When we return from this break, hopefully we would have sorted the audio hitch. Stay with us. right, welcome back from that quick hitch break there. All right, glad to have you back, Benjamin Alika. Thank you. So let's continue your conversation as regards the role of the United Nations and what Vladimir Putin, if this would have caused Vladimir Putin and the Russian government to have a change of mind or probably soft pedal in the current war between Russia and Ukraine.
Okay, so I was saying that, given the background of the formation of United Nations as a global body, to oversee the evolution, of nation states as sovereign nations, to ensure that there is a global body as a global policeman or ombudsman to prevent invasion of nations such as this or interruption of the smooth existence of a sovereign nation by another nation, because this is on the principle that the world cannot survive if we allow, a situation where a stronger nation or existing nation, a neighboring nation, will just wake up overnight and then invade another nation, and that was, that is noteworthy, especially where we are still evolving, at a global level, as it were, because the tendency is there, a reason. And so, but the question, like I said earlier, is whether from the United Nations rule effectively, because where there is an action in need, yes, there are many provisions, especially given that kind of role that United Nations was meant to play, to be able to enforce the Nations Charter, a sister nation or it will.
All right, let's move on to the next talking point. Let's look at the issue of the COVID-19 vaccine, where a Dutch court has ruled on Wednesday that billionaire and global vaccine proponent Bill Gates must stand trial in Netherlands for allegedly misleading the public about the safety of the COVID-19 vaccines during the pandemic time. How do you see this playing out? The fact that finally some persons, the plaintiffs or some citizens of the world, finally have the courage to sue Bill Gates for misleading them towards believing that the vaccine was going to take care of the COVID-19 pandemic, and some say they have suffered some injuries. Do you see this as a landmark move to get justice for those who felt they were misled by the different, stories and assurances given as regards the vaccines that were hurriedly, churned out during the pandemic period?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so sorry, I don't know, the network here has not been so favorable and so friendly, so I keep going off and on. All right, so we're actually earlier trying to deal with the issue of Russian invasion of Ukraine, and then the Secretary General of the United Nations meeting with Putin. So we're saying that, well, just to wrap it up, that it is first and foremost an illegality, an international illegality, when you construe the action of Russia against Ukraine, by way of invasion of a sovereign and independent nation. And we've seen that aggression. We have seen the catastrophic consequences of that invasion, because an all-out war, that has been unleashed against Ukraine, and that has international and global consequences, even in terms of food and peace and security all across the world. Now, but the question is whether, yes, it's okay, Guterres having to have a meeting with Putin, is a welcome development by way of an action or something, trying to do something. But is it enough? Is it enough? Will that in any way deter Putin, on one side? Will it prevent further war? We know that is not going to happen, so far, all right, because Russia has, advanced and engaged with this war, prosecuted this war with no consequences, all right, as it were. So the question now is it possible that we, United Nations can rise up to this challenge? Let's even say for the preventing such reoccurrence even beyond Russia and Ukraine. I mean, we see what is happening in the Middle East at the same time. The whole of Middle East is at the brink of, another catastrophic war. Now, can it be prevented? What is United Nations doing, okay, by way of prevention, as it were, whether diplomatically or military-wise or politically? So it's the world is showing the vulnerability, of the whole world, particularly the disadvantaged nations and peoples of the world against the strong. We are seeing that manifesting and happening all over the world. Especially right now, is something that is increasingly heightening by way of seeing stronger nations, stronger entities, taking advantage of the systems, usurping the systems, to plunder nations, to plunder peoples, and so on and so forth. We've seen that politically, across Africa, like what is happening in Mozambique, okay, what has happened in Severally. So it is also revealing to us the level of, progression in terms of civilization and development, advancement,
All right.
of the human society. Yeah. So,
all right, let's move to the next talking point. Just taking us to the Netherlands, where a Dutch court has ruled that billionaire and global vaccine proponent in the person of Bill Gates must stand trial in the Netherlands for allegedly misleading the public about the safety of the COVID-19 vaccines during the pandemic time. How do you see this playing out? The fact that some world citizens have gotten the courage in Netherlands to sue the COVID-19 vaccine proponent in the person of Bill Gates, saying he misled them into believing the efficacy and effectiveness of some of these vaccines that were hurriedly churned out during the pandemic. How do you see this playing out? For someone like you who is from the legal background, how do you see this panning out?
Well, first and foremost, it's I will tell you that personally, I am gladdened, all right, at the development in Netherlands. For years, we have seen the activities of Bill Gates and his foundation. So much has been said. A lot of allegations have been leveled, right, as to the propriety or otherwise of his activities, especially in this area. Not just, vaccines generally, whether that of COVID or whether that of polio, different areas. I mean, I'm not a medical personnel, but at least I have followed, a lot of these conversations. A lot of whistles have been blown, several in United Nations, Europe. Even during the pandemic, we have seen a collection of medical doctors rising to say, look, these vaccines, right, in terms of clinical trials and processes that processes ought to have been followed, to validate or to clinically validate
prove
the vaccine
efficacy
before it is consumed. Yeah, so, and most people have called it conspiracy theories, one theories after the other, ignoring the substance of the fears and concerns of the people, even when, there were valid proofs that these drugs were harmful to the human persons, particularly when the processes that were supposed to have followed to ensure that clinically these drugs were, safe for human consumption and the rest of them. These things were rushed, and we also saw the circumstances in which, the COVID epidemic invaded the whole world, and then the, almost what one would call a predetermined response in terms of vaccines prescription. And we also saw that every effort to provide alternative solution in terms of medical solution, medications to those who were already infected, by way of preventing or curing, were also resisted. And then to think that this was also happening in complicity with what's called World Health Organization, left a lot to be desired, such that it was becoming clear that the global population do no longer have protection and choices in terms of how they manage their medical challenge, as it were. Now, coming to the case that has been filed, the action now, the legal action that is taking place in Netherlands against him, by an individual. By individual, that was not government. I don't have so much details of what the case is, but at least from the information you've just given to us, and also what I've just seen briefly before this program, it is very clear that this is exactly what's supposed to have been done. Even in the United States, okay, even if we in Africa haven't such muzzle, because this is where it's supposed to have started, really. So I can't see anything more gladdening and welcoming than the fact that the court also had been able to rise to the challenge to say, look, we have jurisdiction over this case, and that this guy should stand trial. And so it's going to be very, I want to look forward to how it's going to pan out. I'm going to watch closely the proceedings to see how the court, will carry out the proceedings, and then see what the verdict and the outcome will be. But if the case is properly adjudicated upon and justice is administered or carried out, I think it will be a milestone, for the defense of the rights of the global population, against this kind of onslaught, and especially from just one man or a group of people, who have taken it upon themselves, to lead the world at this time, traversing nations. That these guys have no national boundaries in terms of their influence and their capacity, to influence direction of decisions of governments at the international level, global level, and at a national level. Believe me, Tony, this is a very welcome idea and welcome development. And I'm going to really want to see how the proceedings progress, and then what will be the outcome. I'm sure so many things happening. Other facts are likely to be brought to the fore in the course of this trial. Yeah, I want to think so. Definitely.
All right, I'll keep our fingers crossed to see what happens, especially when the former Dutch Prime Minister and who is the current NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and members of the Dutch government of the COVID-19 outbreak management team, and Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla and the Dutch state itself was also mentioned in the suit. So we'll get to see how this pan out. All right, let's come back home sweet home, they say. Let's get to the African continent, where we are looking at Mozambique this evening. The Mozambican capital, Maputo, woke to wreckage on Friday as a protest overnight turned violent following the ruling party Frelimo's re-elections after 49 years in power. Hundreds of opposition supporters demonstrated rejecting what they called stolen ballot by a corrupt electoral commission, which on Thursday announced candidate Daniel Chapo had won the October 9 elections with 71% of the vote. I'm so happy we've got someone who is a leadership consultant here with us, talking about the executive director of the Global Leadership Commission. Alika, let's look at this closely. We're looking at a party that has been in power for 49 years, and it's been said to have won a re-election with 71% of the vote and turning Mozambique into another restive country in Africa. What do you think is really playing out in terms of leadership crisis in the African continent?
Well, it's a very perplexing situation, actually, if you ask me. It's actually perplexing. You can see the trend, from Nigeria to Cameroon to Cote d'Ivoire.
We got to Kenya too.
too. Yes, Kenya, definitely. We talked about that last week. And then Mozambique. Well, I think it is the same. It's the same thread. It is the same circumstances. Now, first and foremost, for you to grow and develop as a sovereign nation, there are a lot of fundamental elements that are required. One of those requirements is that of national self-identity. What defines you as a nation, as a sovereign nation, in terms of overall defining and commanding philosophy, vision, aspiration, as a collective, as a people. Now, that's one aspect. The second aspect has to do with citizenship, right? The ability of a state to evolve quality citizens, cultured, developed, with high literacy level in terms of educational project for that nation. And then also have institutional capacity, that is almost equal to the state in terms of their independence, in terms of their incorruptibility, in terms of their objectivity, and then patriotism as a great pillar and foundation upon which the nation sits, or the nation, a country is able to govern itself and then actualize itself. Now, if you look at Africa as a whole, if you look at our history, you see that much of the problems we face today has historical perspective to it or context to it, right? Now, our inability to evolve, from the challenges of our independence. Now, like I said last week, you realize that with most African countries, particularly Nigeria, evolved without any fundamental basis, of existing as a nation of shared destiny, with everyone with a common aspiration in such a way that we have our common sense of meaning as a people, all right? And we have what we aspire to. And over times, we have now evolved on the basis of those common values, which now also, crystallize into, national interest, national will, defining not just our individual interest, but our capacity, to embrace our sense of commonwealth, sense of well-being as priority over, our individual and conflicting interests. Now, if a nation does not exist by simply being able, to conduct elections, all right, periodically, and so on and so forth. Now, the implication of our not being able to rise, civilizationally, is that we have continued to live on borrowed, templates in terms of leadership, in terms of governance, in terms of political system, in terms of identity, in terms of education, everything. So we have not been able to take ownership of our destinies as a people. Now, if you look at countries like, Europe, most European countries, right? Asian countries, you see that they have evolved, collectively and organically, all right, in such a way that they are very cohesive. If you look at, especially Scandinavian countries, for instance, you look at Finland, you look at Norway, you look at Sweden, you look at Denmark, you don't hear things like this, right? So there is the civilizational aspect, all right, and there's the institutional aspect, there's the historical aspect, all right, that now help nations to become so organic, and so cohesive, and also forward-looking, and then also responsible or crystallized citizens that have a common sense, of responsibility to the nation and to itself.
All right, we'll go for a quick break because of the Zoom we are on. We'll go for a quick break. We urge you to rejoin us as soon as you can so that the discussions would continue as we'll be looking at the next talking point, which has to do with former President Olusegun Obasanjo blaming Africa's food insecurity on policy somersault. That will be after this break. Please join us. Is the desk on Global Television.
Nigeria. Come join Anthony Momodu on television's most compelling and facts-finding talk live show.
We are the
Can we
Palestinians.
not
We
say
are the
that of
Canaan
them?
because
That this country gets it right.
It's the Dex on Global Television, where we analyze and dissect storming issues and commentaries in the world's biggest black nation, Nigeria.
Who is being held accountable for this money?
The eyes have it.
We stay and decide policies and reforms on the Dex. Tune in Mondays to Fridays, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Global Television. Let's stay on the Dex.
Is the desk on Global Television.
Nigeria. Come join Anthony Momodu on television's most compelling and facts-finding talk live show.
we are the
Can we
Palestinians.
not
We
say
are the
that of
Canaan
them?
because
That this country gets it right.
It's the Dex on Global Television, where we analyze and dissect storming issues and commentaries in the world's biggest black nation, Nigeria.
Who is being held accountable for this money?
The eyes have it.
We stay and decide policies and reforms on the Dex. Tune in Mondays to Fridays, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Global Television. Let's stay on the Dex.
From the break is still the desk on Global Television, and we still got Benjamin Alika helping us look at issues from a very broad perspective. Let's move to the next talking point where we're looking at the issue of the food insecurity in Africa, where a former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, has blamed the lack of continuity and policy somersault as one of the major hindrances to achieving food security in Africa and the continent's overall development. Obasanjo said that the government should also stay away from getting involved in business of production, but rather provide an enabling environment that could make the private sector drive the economy of the country. The former president said the hunger crisis in the nation and the continent are currently battling, which would have been this was if the culture of continuity in developmental and food production efforts had been sustained. All right, let's look at what former President Olusegun Obasanjo is saying. Do you agree with him that policy somersault and lack of continuity in government is the key drivers for the food insecurity in the continent?
Well, okay. Now let's draw some few lessons from our last conversation. All right, in terms of what's happening in Mozambique. Okay, as part of the policy continuity issue, because policy continuity has to do with also, I mean, has a lot to do with the processes that brings this government into power. All right. So talking about election, all right, that's where it starts from. Okay. When you borrow a developmental template, all right, philosophy, ideology, solution from outside of your job, outside of yourself, I mean, the best you could have done is that, one, you are able to align, such solutions to your own local environment, local peculiarities, all right, to ensure that the adaptability is able to enhance, your own developmental evolution process, okay, and aspiration. That is one. Second, democracy wasn't supposed to be simply a means of, elections. No, democracy is more than that. There's democratic values, democratic culture, of a culture that a nation is first and foremost meant to embrace. Okay, by the time you embrace democracy without democratic values, without democratic culture, then you are definitely going to run into crisis. All right. Now, because part of the values of democracy is that of independent institutions. That's one. Secondly, you're talking about citizens also with capacity for independent thinking, mindedness, and choices. Okay, you're also talking about citizens and leaders who have been able to rise above, primordial instincts and thinking and competition and survival. Okay, so with that, you can now be able to lead, the processes of leadership evolution and also governance and then policy administration for a nation. Now, once you don't have this background as a foundation, every other thing you are trying to build upon it is going to have problems. Now, you have nations where individuals who become president, all right, automatically you solve the entire systems and institutions. All right. Now, this guy command, especially where you have, like Nigeria, where you have what's it called, presidential system of government, where so much power is conferred on the president. All right. For instance, in appointment of core public officials, even though yes, we have Senate having to be able to confirm, we also realize that through party politics, you don't longer see the fine line of difference between the various arms of government, just like we have today in Nigeria. You see the executive usurping the entire structure. That is one aspect. And the other side of it is the quality of the leaders themselves. Okay. Now, so when you have leadership who have no capacity to visualize the consequences of their actions, or capacity to understand the existential nature, of governance, of leadership, has to do with the destiny of that nation, then you are going to begin to see a whole lot of distractions. So we have leadership that is being churned out today across Africa, who do not realize the existential nature, of national self-actualization and sustainability. All right. So now, and then the sincerity of purpose. Now, let me say this: we have seen leadership in Africa that has the focus is more of acquiring power rather than development. Okay, which is totally opposite of what you have mostly in the West. All right, so our systems are not able to, our institutions are not able to withstand such kinds of people. All right, such kind of situation. So where you have leaders who emerge and become stronger than the nation itself and institutions. Okay, and then the other part of it is the fact that because we are not developing in terms of manpower, all right. So you see that the appointees of these leaders, okay, politically, you see the election commission of that country now totally and completely emasculated and usurped by the ruling party, and we're seeing that happen in Nigeria also. Okay, so we are not evolving, we're not developing. Now, coming specifically to the issue of food security. Now,
I'll try and wrap it up in 2 minutes. Try and wrap it up in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Now, let's take Nigeria, for instance. The last 8 years, beside policy continuity, right? Now, we have seen insecurity challenge. as a basis of, as a great threat to food production in Nigeria. It was not far-fetched. There's nothing difficult to see. Our bushes were taken over by bandits, all right? Our people cannot go to farm, and we're still operating almost at a subsistence level. So I agree with the president, the ex-president, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, that yes, policy continuity accounts for, but truly and indeed, it is beyond policy continuity. It is the overall challenge of national development and evolution that we have to begin to look to, in terms of our ability to govern ourselves and to take control, of the processes of governance as required, whether in policy administration, implementation, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, the Executive Director of Global Leadership Commission, Benjamin Alika, for joining us this evening on the program, The Desk. Hopefully, in the coming days, we hope to have you in the live studio so that we can chew up on issues of national interest. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me, Tony. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, that's how we're going to call it a wrap on today's edition of the program, The Desk on Global Television. My name is Anthony Momodu, saying thank you for always being part of the most compelling talk show on TV. Good evening.